Today's unfortunate story is Ivan Milat. Ivan Milat was born on the 24th of December 1944 in Guildford. He had 14 siblings. Some of them are Richard, Shirley, Boris, Alex, Bill, Walter, Olga. His convictions were 7 counts of attempted murder, false imprisonment, robbery, apprehended the 22nd of May 1994. That's excluding the obvious 7 murders that he committed. Ivan Milat was a road worker who savagely murdered backpackers in the Balingo State Forest in the early 90s. Ivan was Australia's most notorious serial killer. In the late 60s, Ivan was a teenager. In his 20s, Ivan served a long jail sentences for break-and-enters and burglaries. Ivan, in between jail terms, found the time to have affairs with 2 of his brother's girlfriends at the same time. How do you even have time to do that? A bit of backstory is that Ivan's father, he came from Croatia and he worked on the wars in Sydney. Widespread media coverage suggests that his father was very strict and that he ran his household with an iron fist. Ivan's father also had a tomato plantation and he got the sons to work for him, so you can only imagine what kind of, strictness that they went through in that family, but in no means does it say that, yes, he is allowed to kill all those poor innocent backpackers. But I just wanted to give you guys some sort of context to who his father was. In the 1970s, Ivan was tried but acquitted of raping an 18-year-old girl named Margaret Patterson. Margaret had been hitchhiking to Melbourne. In 1989, Deborah Everest and James Gibson went from Sydney towards Albury-Wodonga, and they never were heard of again, but the police were called. The other victims, Shimon Shahid, 21 years old from Germany, was on her way to Sydney from Melbourne in 1991. She never made it. Amber Anna Heshbid, 20 years old, she's also German, 1991, never made it to Darwin. So these people were hitchhiking, he'd see them in the side of the road, he would ask them to come into his car, they would, they would come in there, they would half by trust this man, he would drive them around, and from Paul Onions, which I'll get to later, he is the one that told the police at the time and on the stand about the questions that Ivan was asking. Like, he was asking Paul sort of questions like, do you have anybody waiting for you? Stuff like that. That's what he would ask these women to. Clark, 21, and Walters, 22, hitchhiked together in Mildura, Victoria in April 1992. They were never seen again. Media became very interested in the case. In September 1992, 2 runners discovered the bodies of Clark and Waters. Waters had been stabbed 21 times in the back and 14 times in the chest. Her spine had been severed. Clark had been shot 10 times in the head while blindfolded. Also stabbed in the chest. How absolutely horrific for these 2. A year later, in October 1993, a bushman collecting firewood found the bodies of James Gibson, and a month later, police found the bodies of other 3 German backpackers. Paul Onions flew to Australia to give evidence against Ivan Milat. Paul escaped from Ivan in 1990. Paul got into Ivan's car as they kept driving. Paul became very nervous. Ivan kept asking weird questions. Did you know where you're going? Was anyone waiting for you in Canberra? Onions got extremely suspicious, leapt out of the vehicle. Ivan shot at him a couple of times, and he dodged it and ran. And he ran, and then he got into another person's car that he flagged down and went to a police station. Ivan also asked, have you done any special training in the Navy? They were coming up to the Balengo State Forest. Ivan pulled over saying, I need to find some cassette tapes. And then he pulled out the gun, also the rope, and he said, this is a robbery. Onions made a run for it, just like I said before. Fired a shot, Onion flagged down a car and got away. Onions, at the time, made a report with the police. The police told Onions they probably wouldn't be able to find that man. 6 years later, his testimony was crucial to Ivan's conviction. Ivan Milat's family, well, I'll tell you something. His nephew in 2012 was sentenced to 30 years in prison for the murder of his friend in the Balengo State Forest. And he stated when the police caught him, that's what mulats do. Excuse me? What do you mean that that's what mulats do? It's like he looked up to his creepy ass uncle who committed all those murders and thought that he was somewhat cool. How could you believe that your uncle is cool because he savagely murdered and raped his victims and left them to die in a forest? How could you think that that's something to be proud of or to even look up to? It makes zero sense to me. I want to read you guys a quote from Dr. Quintengast. A person has done this who has fallen so far and short of what we condone to be normal human behaviour. It falls short of normal criminality done for opportunity, gain, status, or insult. The person engaged in homicide for their own psychological gratification is natural that we want to know what's gone wrong. Milat used some of his victims as target practice. One had been decapitated. 2 of his victims were stabbed in a way that would cause paralysis. They felt everything for long periods of time, guessing without being able to move. Another victim had their spinal cord completely severed. All but one of the victims had been subjected to interference before and after death. Ew. That is gross. The reason why Milat got away with the rape of the lady that was 18, from multiple sources that I've read, Milat's lawyer actually went down the road of stating that the victim was a lesbian, and at the time in the 70s, that was very taboo. And the jury didn't believe the woman. Milat was actually linked to unsolved cases. Leanne Goodall, who was 20, Robin Hickey, who was 18, and Amanda Robinson, 14, in 1970. And he was a road worker at the time. Former Police Assistant Commissioner Clive Small believes that Milat committed other murders. He said, I'm satisfied the 1987 murderer of Peter Kitcher was Milat, he told the BBC. Kitcher was 18 years old. He was found in Balengo State Forest in 1998. The case is unsolved. Kitcher was shot in the head and stabbed several times. The bullets that they found at that crime scene, they were the same bullets from the same gun as the backpacker murders, but yet they could never pin it on Milat. For years, Ivan Milat escaped detection for the backpacker killings. He went undetected for a long period of time. It was only that Onions, when all this was going on, he was in England at the time, and he travelled to Australia to have that man arrested. Onions actually played a huge part in this, and if it wasn't for him, Ivan Milat would be still roaming around. A bit of a backstory on how Ivan is a manipulator and an attention seeker. In 2009, well after he was convicted, sentenced, he was 64 years old. He stood over the basin of his cell sink, cut off his finger with a plastic butter knife in an attempt to mail this letter to the Australian High Court. Only thing is, when his finger got cut off, he had a sook, rang up, buzzed up for the guards, got them to come in, help him. They sent him to hospital and they couldn't reattach his finger. Oh, what an idiot. Before that, in 2001, Milat swallowed razor blades, disposable razors, a small chain from nail clippers. They also found a blade in a biscuit packet in his cell. And in 1997, Milat tried to flee with an inmate, George Savars. He was doing anything for attention. How embarrassing. The other strong evidence was keeping possessions of his victims, sleeping bags, camping equipment, weapons, which were found that, those weapons caused the injuries on these people that he mutilated. It is not out of the ordinary for killers to collect trophies, remembering the killings of their victims, says criminologist Dr. Kitchengast. It's part of the psychopath's overconfidence, the belief that they can fool anyone belief that they can fool anybody through manipulation and their charm. And Milat might not have been the sharpest tool in the shed, the best looking, the most handsome man, but these people have a way with words. He obviously had a way with words to get these women and men into their car. He must have had some sort of way about him to get a beautiful young girl walking up a hill. He's driving past. He had a way about him. These killers have a way about them to get beautiful women like this on the screen right now to jump in their car. And the questions that he would ask, he would know if he would be able to kill them or not, if anybody was looking for them. A mother of one of the victims said that who knows what Deborah could have made her life. She was a clever kid. I still find it very hard to believe that the evil that could have gone on that night, to deliberately do that to somebody young and innocent, kids suffering out of their minds, out in the bush in the middle of the nowhere. It's such a sad way to go. Dr. Kozengast said a person has done this who has fallen so far short of what we consider to be normal human behaviour. Could you imagine being these parents, and to this day they have the image of this man walking around the bush thinking about his next victim? He used some of them for target practice. He shot and shot and shot and shot at them and just used them for target practice. And then when he was half done with them, he severed their spine with his big-ass knife. And then when he was satisfied, he'd finally kill them. But before that, he would leave them in paralysis. So basically that means that he would stab them in a way that they could feel all the pain and suffering. This man ended up dying in prison. Thank goodness for that. But all the pain and suffering that he has caused, and there is no way that he murdered only 7 people. This man is responsible for way more murders than that. We all know that. But just imagine, you're walking down a highway and you jump in a car thinking that you're half by safe, and you're not. And Australia was meant to be the lucky country at the time. And then this shit goes and happens. And his whole family is super weird, apart from the brother that Ivan cheated on. Well, Ivan was the one having the affair with the brother's girlfriend, and Boris came out and had a go at him and stuff. But just imagine if this happened to one of your family members. It's absolutely horrible.